Hey, what's going on, guys? Masterinthezone here, also known as Ilias. Today we're continuing our series in the School of Battle, Frederick the Great, by Extra History. Make sure you check him out for other videos. It's been interesting so far, and so far, we got to know that Frederick the Great, he was in fact gay, and he was very enlightened, as in where he would study poetry, art, and music, all that kind of stuff, and philosophy that was raving throughout Europe at the time. His father didn't like it. He was a religious man who would be obsessed with the military and army, and who would try implementing it to his son, and yada yada yada. Basically, a conflict of interest. But yeah, this is gonna be pretty interesting to see. Since this is Prussia, I'm guessing there's a lot of warfare going to be involved. So let's get right into it.
The Rhine, April 1734. It's the War of Polish Succession, and Frederick, Crown Prince of Prussia, is trying to be the man his father wants him to be. Though court-martialed after his attempted escape to England, he's been restored to military rank in order to gain battlefield experience. But this is not how you run an army. Frederick is embedded with the forces of the Holy Roman Empire, confronting the French under the famed general, Prince Eugene of Savoy. Yet Eugene is a fated hero. He can pass wisdom and experience to Frederick, sure, but he's also 70, frail, and can barely remember his last conversation. He's cautious and defensive, afraid to act. His body was still there, Frederick later observed, but his soul had gone. And the Imperial Army, well, it was...
Especially during this time, it's good to have someone experienced and a war hero and all that, but you don't want someone like that too old to forget stuff like that. And they're gonna be stubborn. They're gonna have old tactics. They're gonna have old things, and they're not gonna allow technology to catch up and to embrace technology through the military, which would actually hinder them. So I don't see this guy as being successful, but I guess that makes what Frederick the Great, stand out.
Weak, disorganized, and fractious. I
Makes
could
sense.
defeat this enemy, Frederick muses, and he would get his chance. For this terrorized prince was about to start a fire that would burn through Europe and the world. At the end of last week's episode, Frederick decided to play the role of the dutiful son, and wait until his ill father died. He submitted to a new regime of tutors that focused on making him
Yeah, if you're the crown prince and you're having troubles with your dad, who is a king, just wait for him to die. Then you get all the authority, all the power. You don't have to worry anything after that.
masculine, agreed to marry a woman he detested, and went to war. But a strange thing happened. Frederick actually became a pretty good soldier. As colonel of a regiment, he developed a fascination with strategy, battlefield tactics, and leadership. And while he never truly saw any action during the War of Polish Succession, he acquitted himself honorably. When he returned, his father, Frederick William, now confined to a wheelchair by gout, reconciled with his son. Proud of Frederick's progress, he gave him a lakeside castle, where he could indulge in artistic pursuits in private. Frederick and his wife, Elizabeth Christine, moved in, though in truth he largely kept clear of her. There, he read books, staged plays with friends, played the flute, set up a regular discussion group on military strategy, and recruited architects to expand his new
So basically, son, you did good. You know what? I've been too harsh on you. I'll let you have this thing. As long as you just, stick to what you're doing.
home. It was the happiest time of his life, though he was clandestinely doing something else as well, preparing to become king. See, some of those architects started quietly taking trips on his dime, studying opera houses in Italy and France. He also immersed himself in philosophical writing, producing his first book, The Anti-Machiavel, an idealistic refutation of Machiavelli's The Prince. In the book, Frederick argues in favor of an enlightened absolutist monarch who would provide a moral example to his people and keep them healthy and happy. He then sent the manuscript to the French philosopher.
That's where that came from. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this idea gets really popular, and Catherine the Great actually tries implementing them. But future Russian marketers pretend to and like to say that they're implementing them, but really not, and really following Machiavelli.
Philosopher Voltaire, who edited it and prepared it for anonymous publication.
That's
Though
probably
his
why.
identity did leak immediately. It would eventually become a bestseller, with readers hoping to gain a window into Frederick's mind. And perhaps the greatest insights could be found in a section on the type of wars he considered just. It contains some of the things you'd expect, such as defensive wars or wars of last resort, but also what Frederick called wars of interest. In such a war,
I don't like that. That sounds kind of suspicious. Very suspicious indeed. I think I smell oil. Probably should invade and rock.
King realizes an enemy is going to declare war on him in the future and preemptively attacks them in order to gain the greatest military advantage. Was Frederick already considering the moves he'd make during his reign? Well, it's possible. Though by this time, he had become adept at keeping people at a distance, hiding behind a series of masks and personas that sometimes contradicted one another. And more often than not, he adopted the part of a misanthropic loner. Some historians see this as a survival tactic, a response to trauma, and an attempt to hide his sexuality. But it did mean that even for close friends and ministers, it was really difficult to get inside Frederick's head. So it's hard to say exactly how Frederick felt in May of 1740.
Basically, he was a changed man. He keeps to himself, just to stay safe.
When he got word that his father was dying, rushing to the palace in Berlin, they had time for one last talk. And it turned out that while opposite on all else, their political ambitions aligned. Both dreamed of uniting the scattered territories of Brandenburg, Prussia, currently sprinkled through the Holy Roman Empire or embedded with Poland, and both thought their kingdom could be one of the great nations of Europe. Then, on March 31st, 1740, Frederick William died in the arms of the son he'd tormented. But Frederick wasn't left alone. For now, he had the most efficient bureaucracy in Europe, an unmatched recruitment system, an army of 80,000, and an enormous war chest of funds.
he's got everything set up for him. All he has to do is just find an excuse to go to war, and that's it.
An amount his father had amassed by avoiding foreign wars. The Soldier King had, ironically, relied chiefly on clever diplomacy and never fully used the army he'd built. King Frederick II, however, would. But first, some fun. Frederick's immediate move after his father's death was to build an opera house. He wanted to invest in the arts and sciences, which, ironically enough, his father had defunded so badly that they actually had to borrow soloists from Saxony to sing at his funeral. Next up, no longer requiring.
Damn, it was that bad? Did no one know how to sing in their country? Was everyone just in the military?
A wife to mollify his father, Frederick sent poor Elizabeth Christine to a palace outside Berlin. She wasn't even invited to his coronation. Instead, he brought an Italian philosopher who was likely his lover, and the pair followed it up with a foreign trip together where they met Voltaire.
Oh boy, I really feel bad for the girl.
Then, with all of that out of the way, Frederick prepared for a war of interest. October 20th, 1740, Vienna. Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor and sovereign of the Habsburg dominions, is dead. All his life, Charles had been terrified that he would only have daughters, and because the laws of the Habsburg dominions said women could not inherit, his scattered territories would fragment in a succession crisis when he died. To prevent this, he'd issued the Pragmatic Sanction of 1713, declaring that a woman could inherit the Habsburg lands, and he spent most of his reign trying to get his neighbors to agree to it. Good thing, too, since his daughter Maria Theresa proved his most viable heir. Ironically, a woman Frederick tried to marry when he was searching for a bride. Now that'd be an alternate history novel worth reading.
Damn, if he was successful with that, man, that'd be crazy. A Holy Roman Empire would have probably not be as bad as it was, you know.
Charles had essentially bankrupted Austria in trying to bribe the great states into accepting the Pragmatic Sanction, a document they immediately backed off of as soon as he was dead.
So essentially, because the Holy Roman Empire is not holy, not Roman, and definitely not an empire, it's more of a federation, they had to do what, like, states had to do in the United States to get a constitution passed. Each state had to pass the resolution in order for it to pass. So it can have an amendment. So in the same way, each state says Saxony, Brandenburg, Holstein, Bavaria, they had to agree to this law in order for it to actually work. And I feel like it's worse because of worse than the United States because there's no guarantee of it. No one is elected. There's no checks on them, such as in the United States.
Austria's military was also weakened from a series of major wars, meaning the vultures were circling, seeing what they could pick off the Habsburg corpse. Of course, Austria also had something Frederick wanted: Silesia, a province that made up a third of Austrian revenue and sat right across the border from Brandenburg. But Frederick needed to make his move soon. Wait too long, and Saxony might take Silesia first, blocking Prussian expansion south. In 6 weeks, lightning speed in 18th century standards, Frederick had mobilized his army and crossed the border into Silesia. It was so easy at first, so much so, that he could not have imagined that this act would set in motion a chain of events that would bring bloodshed not just to Central Europe, but to places as far away as Senegal, Brazil, India, and the Philippines. The First Silesian War and the War of Austrian Succession.
Is this connected to the 7 Years' War?
War of Austrian Succession.
You idiot! You're honestly an idiot. I don't know what's wrong with you. But your ego is pissing me off.
The world, right? I feel like this is somehow connected to the 7 Years' War.
Had begun. Prussian forces were practically unopposed, sweeping up the lightly defended province and taking forts. But Maria Theresa, who would become Frederick's lifelong rival, raised an army and began to oppose him. And so, Frederick II fought in his first battle. Molwitz, April 10th, 1741. As the
1741. No, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be 7 Years' War. This is just War of Austrian Succession. Okay. This is way before that. American independence was 1776. So this was before Napoleon and everything. Okay. For a second, I thought this was like a little bit after Napoleon. I don't know
Austrian
why.
cavalry comes at his right flank. Frederick realizes his mistake. He'd tried to run this battle like an exercise, like he was drilling troops. When they'd come upon the Austrians, they could have simply charged into the smaller, unready army. But instead, he'd formed up, putting his grenadiers between his cavalry, like the great Swedish king Gustavus Adolphus did in the 30 Years' War. A formation that would let the infantry murder cavalry with shots before his own mounted troops could countercharge. A battle plan out of a history book.
Basically, it was a battle plan that was too defensive and was too rigid and wasn't flexible. So, and he got it right out of the textbook too. Yep. So it sounds like something that you ought not to do, which I think he understands.
Instead, the Austrian horse crashes into the right wing of his army and envelops it. His cavalry are standing still when the charge connects. The units mix in a battle of swords and pistols. And Frederick's in the thick of the fighting. It's confused and bloody. There's driving snow and fog, and both sides have white uniforms. The Prussian infantry and artillery keeps firing into their own ranks, mistaking comrades for the enemy. And the Prussian cavalry are starting to rout. Gustavus Adolphus, he thinks. Oh God, this is how Gustavus Adolphus died. Mixed with the enemy, lost in fog.
Wait. How does Gustavo Adolphus die? Did he die because of that exact thing happening? Let me check this out. What the hell? Let me see.
For he has no heir. So Frederick turns his great charger and bolts toward the nearest town. And he doesn't see that behind him, while his cavalry has broken, the well-drilled Prussian infantry starts to move across the field like solid walls, firing in steady volleys, driving off the Austrian cavalry attack. It is Frederick's first battle, and he's running away. But his infantry, the great gift from his father, will stand and fight.
Oh, man. So basically, the professional army is making up for the general's incompetence, the mistakes. They're making up for the mistakes. The more professional the army is, the more likely that mistakes like these are bound to mess up the battle. All right, this was our second Frederick the Great episode. We will be watching the next ones. Hope you like, comment, and subscribe. Comment down below what you think about this episode and if we should continue, and if you like stuff like this, this really helps out the channel a lot. Yeah, and I will be uploading more videos soon. I've been actually trying to. Well, my plan is make a bunch of videos and post them all like in matters of weeks. Like have a bunch prepared, and then schedule them to upload week by week, and just have a whole lot of stock, and then release it a little by little. So I hope you can stay patient with me on this, and hope you stick by. Thank you, and have a good one.